The words came like a slap I could never forget. You will never be enough. I need someone who actually runs things. Lucas said it while balancing a glass of champagne, his voice carrying across the crowded banquet hall. Around us, graduates in their black gowns and proud families raised their glasses. The chandelier light flickered across the silver crest of the business school printed on the folder he had placed so casually on the table. That folder carried the seal of the investment bank we both dreamed of working for, the place with salaries counted in seven figures, the place where futures were made. I froze. My hands tightened on the envelope I was holding, a pale blue one containing nothing more glamorous than my student loan payoff plan. His words cut deeper than any blade. People laughed nearby, clinking glasses, as though the insult was nothing more than background music. Nobody stopped to ask if I was all right. Nobody cared that my 5-year relationship had just been ended in the most humiliating way possible. I felt a strange calm, almost the kind that comes when a storm is too strong to fight. I thought of the keys to my small apartment sitting back at home on the kitchen table, the only thing I truly owned. I thought of how rarely anyone called me unless they needed something. And now, here at a celebration meant to honor our hard work, I was being told I was not enough. Still, I smiled. Or at least I managed something close to a smile. My classmates carried on pretending not to notice. Laughter echoed a fake cheerfulness, covering the cruelty at the center of the room. Lucas leaned closer, his cologne heavy in the air, and whispered, as if it were the final verdict, "Face it, Elena, you were always the support act. I need a star." I swallowed the sting, pressing the edge of the envelope against my palm until the paper bent. In that moment, I understood something. It was not about love anymore. It was about power perception and the way people choose to humiliate others in order to feel bigger themselves. But what Lucas did not know, what none of them knew, was that the story would not end on that stage. It was only beginning. Tell me, have you ever been humiliated in public by someone you trusted? Drop yes or no in the comments and subscribe, because this story only gets darker. I will explain in a moment. I wish I could tell you that humiliation ended at the graduation hall, but life has a way of stretching out wounds like thread pulled too tight. In the days after the whispers followed me, friends who once congratulated me now looked at me with that thin smile people wear when they think you lost a private war. Lucas made sure of it. He paraded Sophia, a fellow classmate with perfectly styled hair and a smile as polished as her resume, across every social gathering. She was the kind who posted every moment online. Within hours, my news feed filled with photographs of the two of them, Lucas holding her waist at a rooftop bar, Sophia tagging him in captions like "Real ambition finds its match." The comments stung more than the pictures. "She's finally with someone who can keep up." Now that is a power couple. They did not tag me, but they did not have to. Everyone knew. At home, family dinners turned into their own theater. My mother, always too blunt, leaned over the roast chicken one Sunday and said, "Maybe Lucas just needed someone less timid. A man in finance needs a woman who can push him forward." My father kept quiet, but his silence was agreement enough. I nodded, carving my meat slowly, as though my entire self-worth had not just been reduced to a dinner table debate. The betrayal cut deeper when I learned the truth behind their sudden rise. One evening, while sorting through my emails, I noticed a forwarded document. It was the investment fund analysis I had worked on for weeks, complete with notes and color-coded tables. Only this copy was not in my outbox. It had been sent from my personal folder to Sophia's email. I stared at the screen, heat rising to my face. They had taken my work, polished it with Lucas's sales pitch, and presented it as their joint achievement. That was why Sophia suddenly sounded like an expert at networking events. That was why Lucas's proposals seemed sharper than ever. My own hours of research had been turned into their stepping stones. The cruelest part, my own family seemed to agree with them. My sister sent me a text that evening. "Honestly, maybe it's good Lucas left. He wants more out of life, and you like safe choices." I read that line over and over until the words blurred. Safe choices, as though stability were a weakness, as though building something solid made me invisible. And then came the group chat message leaked to me by a friend who still had some loyalty. In it, Sophia had written, "Elena is smart but too passive. She will never make it past middle management. We can use her insights for now." Lucas had responded with a laughing emoji followed by, "Exactly. She was never built for leadership." Those words lit a fire I did not know I carried. I sat there, phone in hand, the room quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator, and I realized I had a choice. I could accept their verdict, let humiliation and betrayal define me, or I could turn every insult into fuel. But what they did not know was that the very people whispering about me were already having doubts about Lucas. His charm was easy to sell, but charm without substance cannot keep numbers straight. I had seen it too many times, and soon others would as well. I will tell you how that came to light. For a while, I moved through my days like a shadow. I worked, I smiled when I needed to, and I kept my head down. But silence does not mean surrender. While Lucas strutted across social media with Sophia, I buried myself in projects at the bank where I had recently started as a junior strategist. Numbers became my companions, spreadsheets my defense. One afternoon, as I sat in a conference room surrounded by reports, Richard, the senior vice president, stepped inside. He was a man who carried his years with quiet authority, the sort who spoke less but meant more. He closed the door, set a thick folder on the table, and said, "Elena, I need you to look at this." I opened it and saw a draft proposal for the new internal investment fund worth several $100 million. Lucas's name was highlighted as a candidate for director. My chest tightened. Richard continued, "He is persuasive, yes, but persuasion is not the same as performance. We need someone who understands the numbers and the people. I have been watching you." The words settled like a weight in my chest. Me. The thought of stepping into that arena terrified me. Senior management meant late nights, politics, power struggles, the very world Lucas claimed I was too timid for. Yet here was a man who had seen through the noise and recognized my quiet work. I hesitated. "I am not sure I am cut for leadership," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Richard leaned forward. "Leadership is not about shouting the loudest. It is about making decisions when others hesitate. Think about it." Then he left me with the folder. That night at family dinner, my parents again chipped away at my resolve. My mother asked, "Have you thought about something stable? Maybe you should not chase promotions. Safety matters." My father nodded, adding, "You are careful, Elena. That is good. Do not let ambition ruin you." I pushed peas around my plate and said nothing. The irony burned. Lucas had been praised for his ambition while I was warned against mine. I excused myself early, walking home through streets, lit with warm yellow lamps, wondering if perhaps they were right. Then came another blow. An old classmate forwarded me an email from the alumni board. It contained excerpts of Lucas's application for the director role. As I scrolled through, my stomach turned. Whole sections looked eerily familiar tables. I had designed arguments I had crafted in my own reports. Sophia had polished them, Lucas had presented them, and now he was using them to climb higher. It was a theft dressed as brilliance, and yet people applauded him for it. But fate has a way of tipping the balance when pride grows too heavy. The very next week, whispers began circulating in the office. Lucas's projections did not match reality. His glossy presentations promised returns that ignored basic market constraints. Behind closed doors, managers grumbled about cleaning up his mess. One evening, Richard called me back into his office. He tapped the folder again. "We cannot afford flash without substance. If you want this role, Elena, it is yours to accept. But you must decide now. Do you stay where it is safe, or do you step into the storm?" I thought of Lucas's laughter, Sophia's smug, captions my family's dismissal. I thought of every moment I had been told I was not enough. My hesitation melted into something sharper. "I will take it," I said. Richard smiled the lines at his eyes softening. "Good. Then prepare yourself. The announcement will come soon, and not everyone will be pleased." I walked out of his office into the cool night air, the city buzzing with lights and noise. For the first time in weeks, I felt not fear, but resolve. The crossroads had been crossed, there was no turning back. But what Lucas and Sophia did not know was that their empire was built on borrowed words, and borrowed words cannot stand forever. I will tell you what happened at the announcement. The ballroom shimmered that evening with gold light and the sound of clinking glasses. It was the annual gala of the bank, a night when promotions were announced, alliances sealed, and reputations polished under chandeliers. I arrived in a navy dress, simple compared to the sequined gowns around me, but I walked with calm steps. The weight of the folder Richard had given me weeks ago was gone. In its place was a quiet certainty. Across the room, Lucas held court. His suit was brighter than necessary, his laughter louder than anyone else's. Sophia hovered near him, phone raised, streaming their every move. I caught her saying into the camera, "Tonight is history in the making. Lucas is about to step into his destiny." My stomach tightened, but I did not flinch. I had already chosen my path. At our table, colleagues murmured. Some glanced at me with polite indifference, assuming I was just another bystander. The air smelled of champagne and polished ambition. Then the music softened, and the master of ceremonies took the stage. Tonight, he began, we celebrate not only achievement, but vision. The director of our new strategic investment fund will guide hundreds of millions of dollars and shape the future of this institution. The spotlight swept the room. Lucas adjusted his tie, squeezing Sophia's hand. Cameras flashed. I could hear my own heartbeat steady like a drum. And the new director is a pause, deliberate, heavy, Elena Rivera. The applause began in fragments, uncertain at first, then swelling into a wave. I rose, chair scraping against the marble floor, and walked toward the stage. Lucas's face drained of color, his jaw slack. Sophia clapped with brittle hands, her eyes sharp as broken glass. I climbed the steps, the lights blinding, and shook hands with Richard, who whispered, "You earned this. Own it." As I turned to face, the crowd flashes erupted. For a moment I stood silent, letting the noise settle. Then I lifted the microphone. My voice was calm, almost too calm. "Funny," I said, pausing just long enough for the room to still. "I was told not long ago that I would never be enough. Yet somehow I am standing here. Perhaps leadership is not about who shouts the loudest, but who builds foundations others can actually stand on." The ballroom rippled with murmurs. Some nodded, others shifted uncomfortably, but all eyes were on me, not on Lucas. I saw Sophia lower her phone, the live stream still rolling. I saw Lucas sink back in his chair, clapping once, then stopping as if the motion hurt him. The irony was too sharp to ignore. The man who claimed to need a star was now cast in the shadow of the one he had dismissed. As I stepped off the stage, my phone buzzed. A notification blinked. Sophia's live stream had already gone viral. My words, my face, my rise, it was spreading beyond that ballroom faster than gossip ever could. But the real shock was yet to come. An envelope had been slipped under my seat, heavy with paper. When I picked it up later that night, the seal bore the bank's insignia. Inside were printed messages between Lucas and Sophia, detailing how they had lifted my work and claimed it as their own. The betrayal was documented, undeniable, waiting to ignite. I will tell you what I did with that envelope. I left the ballroom before dessert. The applause still echoed in my ears like distant thunder, yet inside I felt oddly calm. The elevator ride down to the lobby was silent, except for the faint hum of the cables. I clutched the envelope as though it were a life raft. The lobby doors opened onto the cool night city lights shimmering across the river. I breathed in, let the chill settle any doubts, and walked straight to a quiet cafe that stayed open past midnight. In a back booth, I spread the pages across the table. Email chains, timestamp drafts, even screenshots of late-night messages between Lucas and Sophia. Every line proved they had lifted my work. The magnitude was greater than I had guessed. They had not only copied my analysis, they had tweaked numbers to promise returns no market could deliver. Their bravado was built on sand, and the first strong wind would send it swirling. I sipped lukewarm coffee, listening to the soft clatter of dishes, and considered my choices. I could hand the evidence to compliance and let the wheels of policy turn, slow, methodical, private. Or I could do something Lucas would never expect. I could tell the truth in the same spotlight he had chased. The decision felt less like revenge and more like setting a bone straight. I opened my laptop, wrote a concise statement, attached a single file titled "Foundation of Facts," and scheduled delivery to the entire board at 8 the next morning. One click, no flourish. Then I opened my professional network page, the one Lucas often mocked as too quiet, and posted a brief reflection on integrity and unseen labor. I attached a photo from the gala me on stage beneath the chandelier and wrote, "Leadership is earned in silent hours, long before the applause." The post went live. I closed the laptop, tucked the envelope back into my purse, and walked home beneath street lamps that painted the pavement gold. By dawn, my phone buzzed like a beehive. Colleagues, journalists, even distant relatives sent messages. The video of my acceptance speech, trimmed to 40 seconds, had crossed 1 million views overnight. My network post had been shared thousands of times. Underneath, commenters argued about substance versus style, humility versus hubris, but most echoed one line: "Quiet strength speaks loudest." At 9, Richard called. His voice carried equal parts relief and concern. "Compliance has your file. We are convening an emergency committee at noon. Be ready to answer questions. Bring nothing but the truth." "I have nothing else," I replied. Noon found me in a glass conference room high above the city. Outside, cranes moved like slow birds. Inside, 10 directors studied printed pages from my envelope. Lucas sat opposite me, suit immaculate charm, cracked around the edges. Sophia occupied a chair beside him, eyes, red phone, face down for once. The chairwoman, a woman whose gaze could freeze lava, spoke first. Mr. Hale, we have evidence you presented proprietary analysis created by Miss Rivera without attribution, then altered projections to inflate potential gains. Do you dispute this? Lucas adjusted his cufflink, opened his mouth, but no sound came. Silence stretched. Sophia shifted. A single tear slipped, whether from fear or regret, I could not tell. I met Lucas's eyes. Leadership, I said softly, is not a costume one wears for applause. The chairwoman nodded. Effective immediately. Mr. Hale, your employment is terminated. An external review will determine further action. To Sophia, she added, your internship is suspended pending investigation. Papers rustled. Security waited outside. Lucas rose, anger flashing, yet no words formed. He was escorted out, shoes clicking on marble that moments earlier had echoed triumph. After the room emptied, Richard remained. He placed a hand on the back of a chair, weary yet satisfied. You could have left this to internal channels, he said. I could, I answered, but the deception was already public. Truth deserved the same stage. He gave a small smile. The board agrees. We will issue our statement at 3. Be prepared. The media storm will be fierce. Fierce was an understatement. By evening, business outlets ran headlines about intellectual theft and inflated projections. Commentators dissected my speech frame by frame, calling it the moment humility outshone bravado. A well-known analyst tweeted that quiet diligence had finally found its microphone. That night, my family group chat chimed a rarity when the news did not center on Lucas. My sister wrote first. We saw the video. Proud of you. My mother followed with a longer message about lessons learned and the value of patience. I read their words with a mix of warmth and caution. Forgiveness is a river that flows but never forgets its source. I replied politely, grateful, yet guarded. Lucas tried once to call. I let the phone ring. Some bridges are not worth crossing again, even to watch them burn. The next morning, the board's statement praised transparency, confirmed my directorship, and emphasized a renewed culture of ethics. Shares held steady, then ticked upward as investors favored stability over showmanship. In the office corridor, colleagues nodded, some in apology, others in genuine respect. It felt less like vindication and more like equilibrium restored. That evening, as the sky turned rose gold, I walked to the riverfront. The wind carried a cool promise. Ships moved slowly beneath the bridge, their engines a steady heartbeat. I thought about ambition, humiliation, betrayal threads woven into every horizon. People always ask if revenge tastes sweet. In truth, it tastes like clear water after a long walk through dust. Necessary, life-giving, but never the meal itself. Lucas would survive. Charm rarely goes hungry for long. Yet somewhere deep within he would recall the moment applause turned away from him and toward the person he deemed not enough. That memory would follow him like a shadow at noon, small but impossible to outrun. As for me, I had work to do. Hundreds of millions waited for thoughtful stewardship. Young analysts watched to see whether quiet grit could guide an empire. I would not fail them. The best answer to arrogance is competence sustained. But decisions have ripple effects. Truth unsettles those who profit from silence. And soon I would learn that the envelope contained more than emails. It hinted at deeper fraud reaching farther than Lucas alone. I will tell you where that trail led. A week passed, though it felt like a decade. Reporters camped outside the building each morning, their questions floating like gnats, persistent, trivial, impossible to ignore. Inside, auditors moved through cubicles with the quiet efficiency of surgeons. Every drawer, every drive, every archived message came under the cold white light of scrutiny. I spent most of those days in meetings walking the delicate line between transparency and confidentiality. Yet even amid that churn, I kept circling back to the envelope, to one odd attachment. I had almost overlooked a trail of transfers from a shell consultancy to an account bearing the initials S and H. The amounts were modest at first. Tens of thousands then grew into the high six figures. Each transfer carried an approval signature that matched Lucas's, but there was another notation beside it, a cursive flourish I did not recognize. On a rainy Thursday afternoon, compliance summoned me again. They had widened their net and uncovered a pattern stretching back 2 years. Lucas had not acted alone. Funds meant for market research had been siphoned into the consultancy, then laundered into a holding company tied to someone named Gregory Hale, Lucas's father. That revelation chilled the room. Nepotism is an old sin on Wall Street, but outright theft with a family conduit was something else. The board, wary of scandal metastasizing, authorized a private meeting with Lucas before referring the matter to authorities. They asked me to attend as a witness, given the original documentation originated with my analysis. The confrontation took place in a spare conference suite on the 20th floor, blinds drawn against a slate-colored sky. Lucas entered, flanked by two attorneys who whispered so intently they might have been sharing a single breath. He looked thinner, his tailored jacket hanging looser at the shoulders. Arrogance feeds on applause, and starvation suited it poorly. The chairwoman opened the session. Her voice, as always, was ice wrapped in silk. "Mr. Hale, we have traced funds diverted from departmental budgets to accounts linked to your family. Do you dispute the records before us?" Lucas glanced at the pages, then at me. His eyes, once bright, with easy confidence, now held something like pleading. "There is context," he began, but the words faltered. One attorney cleared his throat, the other fixed Lucas with a stare that warned against improvisation. Silence settled like dust. Finally, Lucas spoke again, softer. "My father's company consulted for the bank. The payments were legitimate." The chairwoman tapped a pen. "Consultancy implies deliverables. We have none. What service justified nearly $750,000? Lucas's breath caught. He looked toward me as though I might rescue him, as though the woman he once dismissed could now erase the stain he had spilled. I met his gaze not with anger, but with a kind of exhausted pity. Some people scrape the sky for so long they forget what Earth feels like. The landing is brutal. One lawyer whispered urgently. Lucas's shoulders sagged. "It was my father's idea," he said at last, voice raw. "He said everyone pads numbers, that relationships matter more than rules. I wanted to prove I could rise fast." He swallowed, hands trembling. "I never meant—" The chairwoman cut him off. "Intention does not repay stolen funds." She signaled security. The attorneys stood collecting papers, their expressions blank masks of professional defeat. Lucas hesitated, then walked toward the door. Halfway he turned. "Elena," he said, "I truly thought you were too careful for leadership. I was wrong." I could have answered, but truth required no flourish. He left, and the door clicked shut behind him, sounding remarkably like a gavel. Afterward, Richard and I sat alone. Rain streaked the windows in thin diagonal lines, each droplet chasing another. He exhaled. "This will hit the press by dawn," he said. "Prepare for another wave." I nodded, though. My thoughts wandered to simpler moments, late-night study sessions, where Lucas and I once shared lukewarm pizza and dreams of changing the industry. How far we had traveled from those innocent ambitions, how swiftly ambition curdles when mixed with entitlement. That evening I called my parents. My mother answered, voice gentle, as if afraid to break something fragile. "We have been watching the news," she said. "Your father and I are overwhelmed." There was a pause then, the words she had never spoken so plainly. "We were wrong to doubt you." I leaned against the kitchen counter, the city outside shimmering beneath rain-washed street lamps. "Thank you," I said, no bitterness in the reply. Age softens many edges. Mine had been honed, but not hardened. Before dawn, statements went live. The bank cooperating fully with investigators. Lucas and his father under review. Safeguards strengthened. Headlines turned somber, family ties tangle. In corporate fraud. Analysts noted the institution's swift response credit they claimed to new leadership unwilling to bury hard truths. The next week passed in a blur of recalibration budgets, realigned teams, rebriefed morale, tended like a battered garden after storm. But amid that work, I felt a steadiness, as though a compass long magnetized by others' judgments had finally found its true north. One evening, nearing midnight, Richard stopped by my office. "The board approved your 5-year plan," he said, placing a signed document on my desk. "Also, they want you to represent us at the International Summit this autumn." He paused, eyes soft with pride. "Quiet strength, Elena. It travels farther than noise." When he left, I sat for a while in the hush, the city lights spilling across the carpet like distant fires. I remembered the night Lucas called me insufficient. I remembered the taste of coffee gone cold, while I weighed revenge against integrity. And I realized the journey had never been only about humiliating someone who hurt me. It had been about refusing a narrative written by others. Yet stories ripple outward. Gregory Hale's name was only the first dot on a map of questionable ties. Auditors hinted at more shadows lurking behind respectable doors. The storm was not over merely shifting direction. And as director, I would stand at the helm, charting a course through whatever tempests came next. I will tell you how that wider reckoning unfolded. Summer arrived with its generous light, yet the corridors of the bank felt cooled by something deeper than air conditioning accountability. The regulators opened a formal inquiry, and their questions stretched far beyond Lucas. They examined vendor contracts, advisory fees, even charitable foundations tied to former executives. Each discovery fed the news cycle. Each headline drew public eyes to a truth long whispered, but seldom proven, that prestige often shelters quiet corruption. I spent those days shuttling between strategy sessions and auditor interviews, a stack of notebooks my constant companion. Reporters waited outside the revolving doors, cameras poised. Whenever they called my name, I offered the same steady sentence. The institution will meet every obligation to transparency. It was not theater, it was promise. Inside teams, once siloed, now shared data. Engineers built dashboards where anyone could track fund flows in real time. The culture began to tilt slowly at first, like a great ship adjusting course. Young analysts who had memorized the etiquette of silence found their voices. One morning, a junior associate knocked on my door, documents in hand, duplicate invoices from a consultancy, bearing yet another familiar surname. Her cheeks flushed as she spoke, but her eyes held determination. I thanked her, logged the discovery, and sent it up the chain. Each brave act inspired the next. Outside, the broader public followed along. Commentators on late-night radio debated ethics in finance. Retirees called in to share stories of pensions once gambled away by flashy managers. The narrative was no longer about a single scandalous couple. It had become a mirror reflecting an industry's darker habits. Then came the summit. In early September, I flew to Geneva, representing the bank at a gathering of global institutions. On the second afternoon, I stood before a hall of suits and translators speaking about the cost of unchecked ego. My words were measured, but the tone was clear. Integrity is cheaper than damage control. Invest up front or pay compound interest in shame. When I stepped down, applause rose polite, yet prolonged. A journalist from a major economic magazine snapped a photo of me signing a cross-institutional pledge. The image ran on their cover under the headline, "Quiet Reform, the New Face of Finance." Back home, the board authorized a restitution fund for clients whose fees had been siphoned through Lucas's shell companies. They asked me to chair the committee. We combed through statements, traced every misdirected cent, and issued payments with handwritten apologies. Some recipients wrote back in surprise. One elderly widow sent a note that read, "I thought nobody saw us little folks. Thank you for proving me wrong." I kept that message taped inside my planner. Meanwhile, Lucas faced indictment. Sophia negotiated a cooperation deal and disappeared from headlines, perhaps to rebuild in a quieter corner. Gregory Hale's assets were frozen pending trial. The story closed its outer circle, but echoes lingered. In whispers at conferences, I overheard executives recounting the saga not with scorn but with caution, an oral footnote to teach rising stars what happens when vanity outruns value. One evening, after a 12-hour stretch of committee work, I rode the elevator down with Richard. He studied the digital floor numbers before speaking. "You know," he said, voice soft, "your appointment has sparked similar reviews at 2 rival banks. They fear another Elena might spotlight their own cracks." A small grin tugged at his tired features. Competition through integrity. Who would have guessed? At street level, dusk painted the buildings in amber. I walked toward the riverfront plaza where a vendor sold roasted chestnuts. The scent reminded me of childhood winters, simple moments unmarred by ambition. I bought a small paper bag and sat on a bench, the city humming. Across the plaza, a digital billboard rotated through advertisements until suddenly it settled on a magazine cover. My photograph pen poised above a multi-million-dollar agreement captioned, "A $1 billion fund." Guided by ethics first, the image glowed 20 feet tall in the falling dark. I stared at that larger-than-life version of myself and felt an unexpected tenderness. Not pride, at least. Not solely, but relief. Relief that the girl who once tightened her grip on a thin blue envelope now wielded a pen strong enough to sign safeguards into being. Relief that humiliation had not soured into cruelty, but distilled into purpose. Yet purpose is never static. Regulators would finish their reports, markets would calm, headlines would shift to fresher scandals. The true measure lay beyond the news cycle would the reforms endure when spotlights dimmed. I intended to see that they did, but I also knew the final chapter of this personal journey still awaited closure. Because while institutions can be mended, relationships fracture on fault lines less visible than balance sheets. My family's newfound pride, my colleagues' respect, the industry's tentative admiration, none of it erased the lonely nights when I questioned my own worth. Closure, I realized, was not an event. It was a choice renewed daily. Tomorrow I would host a town hall meeting with every division, from interns to senior partners, inviting critiques of our new transparency systems. Tonight, though, I allowed myself the simple comfort of warm chestnuts and the river's steady whisper. The city lights shimmered like scattered coins, but I no longer measured success by their sparkle. Still, one conversation remained unfinished, the quiet moment when I would face Lucas not as accuser or victor, but as two people who once dreamed together before their paths diverged. Whether that meeting came by chance or design, I felt ready. Some debts are not paid in money or prison terms. They are paid in honest words spoken at last. I will tell you how that meeting unfolded and how this story truly ends. I found Lucas on a winter afternoon months after the inquiries concluded and the cameras turned elsewhere. He was seated alone at a small corner table in a public library cafe. No entourage, no designer suit, just a plain wool coat and a paperback novel he seemed not to read. Perhaps he chose that place because silence is guaranteed. Perhaps because reputations like books can be reshelved but never erased. I had come to return research texts. Fate or whatever guides unfinished business did the rest. Seeing me, he stood halfway, uncertainty written on every line of his face. I nodded toward the empty chair opposite him. He gestured for me to sit. For a time we watched dust motes drift in the slanting light. Finally he spoke, voice softer than I remembered. My trial is set for spring. Plea negotiations continue. I may serve time. I may spend years paying restitution. I wanted to say... His words tangled. He exhaled. I wanted to say that what I took from you was more than data. It was belief. I saw your steadiness and thought I could wear it like a coat. I listened, palms flat on the table's cool surface. Regret can sound like repentance. It can also sound like self-pity. Distinguishing the two is an art I am still learning. Integrity, I said, is custom-fitted. Borrow it and the seams tear. He lowered his gaze, nodding. I understand that now. I will not ask forgiveness. I have not earned it, but I hope you find peace beyond this story. Peace, I realized, was already seated beside me, quiet and patient, not an absence of memory, but a gentle acknowledgement of its shape. I stood offering a small smile, not absolution, yet not condemnation. Take care, Lucas. Outside snow whispered across the pavement. I pulled my coat tighter and walked toward the river night, falling around the city like velvet. Streetlights carved soft halos in the flurries. Each breath rose in pale clouds, then vanished, proof that even the coldest air can hold warmth for a moment. Back at the bank, reforms had settled into routine. Dashboards flashed transparent figures. Junior analysts asked sharper questions. The restitution fund had nearly completed its work. In the lobby, a seasonal display of evergreen branches and brass bells greeted visitors. I paused to read the inscription recently added, beneath the company logo, "Trust is earned daily." Simple words, but they carried the weight of an era. Upstairs, my office overlooked the city skyline towers, blinking red signals to distant planes. I unlocked the drawer where I keep two artifacts, the bent blue envelope from graduation night and the final signed charter of our transparency initiative. One represented humiliation endured, the other integrity chosen. I keep them side by side to remember the span between. That evening, I hosted an informal gathering, a handful of interns, a few senior partners, the junior associate, who uncovered duplicate invoices. We pushed desks aside, ordered humble takeout, and spoke about work and life under soft lamplight. I told them leadership is not a destination, but a recurring decision. Every budget reviewed, every voice heard, every temptation weighed. They listened not in reverence, but in shared responsibility. Near midnight, when the building emptied, I stood at the window. Snowflakes spiraled through the glow of street lamps, each unique yet part of a larger hush. I thought of the girl who once believed safety was her ceiling, of the woman who now steered funds large enough to sway markets, of the elder, I hope to become telling this tale on some future porch, reminding listeners that dignity is the one asset immune to inflation. You listening now may wonder whether revenge truly satisfies. I will answer plainly: what endures is not the downfall of another, but the rise of one's own conviction. Revenge fades, resolve remains. Still, I confess a small human comfort in knowing the world watched arrogance crumble under its own weight. If you believe I made the right choices, comment right. If you have imagined a different path, share your idea below. I will be reading.